This is called Train. This is a sculpture installation in my yard in Winooski. And I see it as a personal archaeology of my own work as a sculptor. These are all casts, plaster casts from molds that over time I've had to chuck because running out of space. And so a lot of the images are of hands and tools and trucks and bulldozers and bits of architecture. I'm really interested in ruins and what comes from ruins, whether they're from real estate schemes, natural disasters, wars, or ancient sites. Gee, I wrote things down to say. And yeah, a lot of my work is about the cycle of life and death. After ruins decompose into the earth, what new growth comes? A lot of the imagery I use is about that cycle and why and what is chosen to be salvaged from these remains lives on in museums and memorials. So just last week I opened a show in Southern New Hampshire University called Archaeology Through the Looking Glass, and I made a sculpture installation that was just brand new for this show, and that's what I'm going to focus on tonight. It's based on my late mother and her books, so I'm going to be talking more about the personal aspect of this creation. This is just around the corner from me in good old Winooski. A house burnt down a few weeks ago. And it's just another image to sort of reinforce the idea of what comes from destruction. These are my mother's legs lying on her bed. She lived in the same house in Stowe, Vermont since 1957, an old Victorian house crammed with over 3,000 books. And this is how I always think of her. This is her favorite situation, lying in bed covered with books and papers. She died of cancer about a year ago. And so one of my tasks was what to do with all her books. And she was an English professor. She taught for decades at Johnson State College. And this is Ray Breyer, the acquisitions librarian there. And he very kindly took all the books and went through them, kept about 800 in her name, and gave others to students and other college libraries. This is the first image of the installation that I just completed. And these are her actual books that I covered with earth and sand, as well as other parts of this installation are these, what I call book leaves and book pages. This shot shows both the wall piece and the floor piece. And basically on the wall there are these mirrored shelves with casts that I made of some of her books. And then on the floor are real books. And then there are what I call intermediary objects, these book leaves that are changing and transforming. This is a word sketch that I did while I was working on the piece, trying to figure it out. And it might seem that it's this kind of neat duality between sort of the Apollonian and the Dionysian, but it's not that simple. It's more like when you look at the books in the mirrored shelves, they're not really that neat and orderly and pristine. And then on the floor, it's not really about all these things decomposing. They're actually cross-pollinating and creating new life in different ways by the shapes that they transform into. So I do a lot of casting in my work, and a lot of these books that I took from her collection, they all have embossed spines and covers, which is why I could cast them. And I repeat the same books, and they're chosen specifically for their titles, but they're all painted or patinaed in different ways. And the mirrored surface alludes to, through the looking glass, the idea of, what is right in front of us. Often there's this other world just beyond it, this reflective imaginary world of what we see in front of us if we could pass through into that other world. And you can see the book starting to morph there. And this is another view that shows some of the other objects that I exhibited, and a lot of them are fragments, and they're framed in wooden frames that look like crates to sort of underline that idea that they could be remains from an archaeological dig. And this is a close-up of some of the book leaves. And they have, some of these leaves have images of faces or houses in them, and a lot of them have book spines in them also. The idea that in our imaginations as well as in books are embedded these memories. This is a close-up of some of the book leaves that are very close to the mirrored shelves, and they're on top of pages from Alice in Wonderland. And these particular ones I cast in paper, and they have ink on them and gilt edges, just like the pages. I use the actual pages from Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass from books that, those are the two books that my father read to my brother and me for years, and I use the actual books. The title of the installation is What's Wrong with the World, taken from this book from my mother that I cast and transformed into a leaf. But in my title, I put a question mark at the end. So it's not just a statement, what's wrong with the world, it's what's wrong with the world. You know, I mean, it's more open-ended. And this is just another close-up detail of a book leaf, the idea of metamorphosis, objects. I often do beings or objects that are in different states of transformation. And, I want to read a quick quote from The Necessity of Ruins. Ruins provide the incentive for restoration and for a return to origins. There has to be an interim of death or rejection before there can be renewal and reform. That's from J.B. Jackson, a landscape architect. And this is the last slide. My mother grew up in Barrie. This is her grave in Hope Cemetery. She requested this line, "Horsemen pass by," which is from Yeats. And the epitaph on his own grave are the last three lines of his final poem, Under Ben Bulbum. And it goes, "Cast a cold eye on life, on death, horsemen pass by."